Hey, have you ever met somebody who thinks that everybody thinks the same way that they do? Like, everybody eats boogers, so it should be okay. Well, we're not going to discuss that. But what we will talk about is false consensus bias, false consensus effect, and we're also going to discuss availability heuristics. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the James View.
Today we're going to be talking about human behaviors, and we're going to especially talk about false consensus effect and availability heuristics. Now, this is some type of thinking. These might be words that you've never heard before, but when we get into this, it's going to be very interesting, I promise. So to start, we're going to be looking at this book. I just finished reading this book. It's an excellent book, Psych 101, and it's written by Paul Kleinman. A crash course in the science of the mind. So this might be something you find interesting. And we'll go right here. I got my little fear of the chopsticks. Teriyaki madness. Very good chicken. I like that, please. False consensus and uniqueness effect. Okay? And then right under that it says, everything I do, you do right. Or right? It's more appropriately said. So let's just read this here. It says the false consensus effect is the phenomenon that occurs among people where the tendency exists to think that our opinions and beliefs are the common opinions and beliefs amongst everyone else. Similarly, the false uniqueness effect is a phenomenon where people underestimate just how common their abilities and desirable attributes really are. The false consensus effect and the false uniqueness effect are examples of cognitive biases, which are flaws in judgment caused by the mind so that the brain can process information at a faster rate. Okay, many people may not know this, but our brains are lazy. Okay, I don't care who you talk to, the most intelligent person you can think of. Lazy meaning that our brains try to figure out a shortcut to do everything. So when we make decisions, a lot of times we don't do a lot of research and we'll just go into something and just make a decision based on what we already know. And that leads us right into our availability heuristic type of thinking. And basically what availability heuristic type of thinking is making decisions based on information that we already know, or getting a little piece of information from something that we read recently and then making a decision based on that. Basically, it's not really doing all the research that we should be doing in order to make a good and well-balanced decision. So with availability heuristic thinking, a lot of times we'll add information, something we read recently, to what we already know and then make a decision based on that. His article in The Very Well Mind, and the article is entitled, What is the Availability Heuristic? It's written by Kendra Cherry, MSED, on September 5th of 2023. I encourage you to look at that. It's a very good article. And it's talking about availability heuristic thinking, and that's a mental shortcut that affects decisions that lead to biases. What are some of those biases? Well, sometimes we may have to make quick decisions and base those things on what we already know because we don't have time to really do research. Some of the examples of this are if we read an article where we hear about lottery winners and the chance of winning the lottery, or we hear read news reports that certain people winning the lottery, and then we therefore go and make the decision, okay, well, now my chances are greater on winning a lottery, so I'm going to go spend more on lottery tickets than we actually normally do based on that thinking. Another scenario is where we read a report about people losing their jobs. So then we may go to bed at night thinking, oh my goodness, I might lose my job. You lay in bed thinking, so then you make the decision to go ahead and start looking for another job, even though the possibility of you losing your job is not really on the table yet. We can also, in another scenario, see reports of high-profile child abduction cases. So then we start to think to ourselves that this is a widespread thing that's going on. A lot of children are being abducted. So I'm not going to allow my kids to go outside. I'm going to keep them inside, and they'll be safer that way. That's another example of availability heuristic thinking. Availability heuristic thinking often leads to overestimating the likelihood that something will happen, even though it's relatively uncommon. This can affect our decision making and take a toll on our well-being. If we tend to worry about it, it can lead to distress and worry. An example of that is, like a thunderstorm. If you hear reports of thunderstorms, or you hear reports of people getting struck by lightning, now all of a sudden you start to think in your head, the next thunderstorm, I might get struck by lightning. I actually had a true story. I had a neighbor who was like that. And one time there was a thunderstorm. She was down the street laying on the horn in her car because she was paranoid, or she had a fear of getting struck by lightning. If there was a thunderstorm, she would be in the house underneath the bed. That's another example of availability heuristic thinking. You read a report and then you make a decision based on it. That can also lead to a phobia in many ways, and it can affect your life. Like, what if there's a thunderstorm and you have to be to work at a certain time, and all of a sudden you can't get to work because you're afraid of getting struck by lightning? Or let's say you need to go to an appointment, meet somebody at the hospital, or meet a client or something like that. You can't go because now you're afraid you might get struck by lightning. So what is the cause of availability heuristic thinking? Well, one cause is that the brain power that we have, we're not capable enough of having enough processing power fast enough to make decisions on things that we need to make quick decisions on. And it gives us the ability to understand the world even faster. Also, there's certain events that could stand out in our mind, something we read recently. It can lead to biased decisions and inaccurate choices. So what are some ways to avoid availability heuristic thinking? Well, the first one is we need to give ourselves time to examine the evidence. Don't make a rash decision, something that we hear from somebody, and then just quick go ahead and believe it. Second way, seek out other information. Sometimes it's hard because we don't have the time, but especially if something challenges our already perceived notions about a certain topic or a certain scenario, we want to seek out other information that challenges what we already believe. A good example of that is what just happened recently with the COVID-19 epidemic, or pandemic, I mean. I have a close friend of mine who did not believe in wearing a mask. A mask doesn't do anything. I can tell you assuredly, I'm hazmat certified. I worked in construction many years. And if I take a handful of dust and throw it in somebody's face, what are they going to do? Most likely they're going to cover their mouth. Hey, what are you doing? You throw, I don't want to breathe that in. But just because a particle is very small and you can't see it doesn't mean it's not harmful. So how can wearing a mask not do anything? People will get a hold of a certain report and they'll think that, okay, because I read this report or I heard it on the internet, now I know that it's true. It's confirmed. I know it's true now because I read it and I already believed it. But isn't that just reading something that fits within your own bias? Just because it's something you don't want to do, you don't feel comfortable wearing a mask, so you're not going to wear a mask. So then I suggest you walk into a surgical department where they're performing a surgery, or walk into a hazmat building and tell everyone take your mask off, because it's not going to do anything, which no one's going to do that. So that should be the end of that discussion. Third way is looking at statistics. If you look at statistics and really do a little bit of research, you don't have to do a whole lot, but it'll give you a clearer picture, and you'll be able to see, you get the bigger picture, and it'll be clear what exactly is going on. Then you can base your decision based on that. You can also, number 4, you want to keep records. So you keep records of, say you want to promote employees. Well, rather than just going by your memory of what this employee did for the past year or months or however long, if you want to promote them, you want to look at their performance. So if you keep records, you'll be able to go back and research those things rather than just relying on your own memory for that matter. Now, going back to the book, Psych 101. We're going to see how availability heuristic thinking and cognitive bias or false consensus bias or false consensus effect go hand in hand with availability heuristic thinking. So Lee Ross in 1977 was a Stanford University professor, and he conducted a couple experiments. The first one, I'm going to mention the first study. The second study, I'm not going to get into just for the sake of time. But the first study he did, it says that he began by having a group of participants read about situations that involve some type of conflict. And then he would ask them to do these three things. So these three things were, he said, the first one was guess the option that the other people in the group would choose. Second was say the option that they would choose themselves. That's the second thing. And the third thing is describe the qualities and characteristics of the type of person that would choose the first option and the second option. So it's basically saying, well, what type of person would choose what the first person would think, or what type of person would choose what the second person would think, which is basically your own thinking. And what he found was the majority of the subjects believed that others would choose the same option as them. But interestingly, in the third part, which is describe the qualities and characteristics of the type of person that would choose the first option and the second option, when people didn't agree with them, to put it bluntly, they took the mindset, if you don't agree with what I have to say, then you must be wrong. So that's the false consensus effect. I'm not going to get into false uniqueness effect because it really hasn't been proven. But that's basically false uniqueness effect is if you kind of have the thinking that whatever you're doing is so unique that nobody else really does it, which is really not the case, because it's really hard to prove that you're so unique, and you think that there are not many people like you in the world that are able to do the same things, which now with social media and the internet, there are tons of people that can actually do the same things that we can do. So in summary, how can we benefit by learning about false consensus effect and availability heuristic thinking? Well, I believe that this can help us in our relationships, in building our interpersonal relationships and those relationships with friends, family, and our romantic relationships as well. It can help us with interacting with people and how those relationships, understanding these types of thinking, it can really put a mirror on ourselves and help us to be able to be more open to other people's line of thinking or line of reasoning. We'll also be able to see how our decisions affect other people and affect how we treat people as well. It's more likely to help us to be optimistic and to be open to more newer ideas and to the other research and other things that are available that other people believe and other people's decisions and how they view things. This will also help to draw other people to us. This will keep us also from dividing people, from classifying other people, creating class distinction, creating cliques and divisions amongst our friends, families, and in our personal relationships. So that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment if you can. I really appreciate it. Thank you.